The sky was a bruised shade of twilight, the kind of light that made everything look like it was holding its breath. Elias trudged through the tall, dry grasses of the Valtan Plateau, his boots crunching over ground that hadn't felt the weight of human footsteps in centuries. He wasn't entirely sure why he'd come. Maybe it was the stories, the whispers of strange lights and ghostly murmurs that seemed to cling to the place like smoke. Maybe it was boredom, or maybe it was the promise of solitude, the kind that wrapped around you like a heavy quilt and didn't ask any questions. He paused at the edge of what remained of the village, a crumbling collection of stone and wood that seemed to huddle together for warmth against the chill of time. A wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of something metallic, something off. "Well," he muttered to himself, adjusting the strap of his pack. "Nothing creepy about this. Just a perfectly normal abandoned village with a perfectly normal unsettling aura. Totally fine." Elias wasn't the kind of man to scare easily, but he wasn't foolish either. The place had a weight to it, a sense of being watched. His hand brushed the small multi-tool clipped to his belt, a gift from a friend long gone, though he couldn't remember if it was a farewell or a forget-me-not. He didn't expect it to help against, say, a ghost or whatever else the locals claimed haunted this place, but it was comforting all the same. The first house he approached was barely standing, its roof caved in, and walls leaning at angles that would make a drunkard proud. Inside, he found little more than dust and debris, though something caught his eye, a faint, pulsing light coming from the far corner. Kneeling, he brushed away the layers of dirt to reveal a smooth black disk embedded in the floor. It was cold to the touch and hummed faintly beneath his fingertips. "Great," he said aloud. "I've found the world's most ominous Roomba." The light flickered and went out, leaving him staring at his distorted reflection in the glossy surface. He stood quickly, the hairs on the back of his neck standing at attention. That was enough investigating for one house. As he stepped back into the open air, the wind picked up again, this time carrying a sound with it, a faint, melodic hum that seemed to emanate from nowhere and everywhere all at once. It wasn't unpleasant, but it wasn't exactly comforting either. He followed it, because of course he did. Curiosity might not have killed the cat, but it certainly made it take some questionable life choices. The hum led him to the center of the village, where a broken fountain sat surrounded by overgrown weeds. At first, he thought it was empty, but then he saw her. She was slumped against the fountain's edge, her body angular in ways that didn't quite seem right. Her skin, a pale green that shimmered faintly in the fading light, was marred by scratches and bruises. She looked up as he approached, her eyes impossibly large and bright, like twin moons reflected on a still pond. "Help me," she whispered, her voice layered with harmonics that made it sound as though three people were speaking in unison. Elias froze. This was not what he'd signed up for. He began eloquently. "Are you okay? Wait, no, that's a stupid question. Clearly you're not okay. What happened? Also, what are you?" The woman, or whatever she was, attempted to sit up, wincing as she did. "No time," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "They'll come soon. Must leave." "They? Who's they? Is this one of those situations where the ambiguous pronouns are supposed to terrify me? Because, mission accomplished." She didn't answer, instead gesturing weakly toward a small device clutched in her hand. It looked like a cross between a smartphone and a jellyfish, its translucent surface pulsing with faint light. "Please," she said again, her tone desperate. Against his better judgment, Elias knelt beside her. Up close, she was even more alien, literally and figuratively. Her fingers were long and tapered, her nails gleaming like polished silver. The smell of metal and ozone clung to her, faint but unmistakable. "Okay, I'm gonna help," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "But just so we're clear, this is officially the weirdest day of my life. And I once got locked in a public restroom for 3 hours with a goat. Long story. Anyway, let's get you out of here before your mysterious they show up and make this even weirder." She blinked at him, clearly not understanding his attempt at humor. He sighed. Right. Alien. Probably not big on Earth jokes. Got it. As he helped her to her feet, she stumbled, and he had to catch her. She weighed less than he expected, her frame surprisingly delicate. You're lighter than you look, he said, immediately regretting how that sounded. Not that you look heavy. I just mean, never mind. Let's move. The hum that had led him here grew louder, more insistent, as they made their way toward the edge of the village. Elias glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see shadowy figures emerging from the ruins. Nothing. Yet. Where are we going? He asked, more to fill the silence than anything else. Safe, she managed, though her voice was growing weaker. Yeah, that's vague and ominous. Can you be a little more specific? No? Cool, just checking. As they reached the edge of the village, she stumbled again, collapsing against him. He lowered her gently to the ground, panic clawing at the edges of his mind. Hey, stay with me, he said, shaking her shoulder lightly. You're not allowed to pass out until you tell me what the hell is going on. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked at him with an intensity that made him feel like he was being measured, weighed, and possibly found lacking. Trust you, she said, barely audible. Yeah, well, that makes one of us, he muttered. And then, just as the first stars began to prick the sky, a sound echoed through the village, a low mechanical whirring that sent a chill racing down his spine. Whatever they were, it seemed they'd arrived. The mechanical whirring grew louder, echoing through the empty village like a swarm of hornets made of steel and malice. Elias crouched instinctively, dragging the alien woman, Lorana as she'd later introduce herself, down beside him. Okay, he whispered, peeking over the crumbled remains of a low stone wall. Whatever they are, they don't sound like they're here to exchange recipes. Lorana's breathing was shallow, her glowing eyes flickering faintly. They patrol. Search for threats, she managed, her voice barely audible. Well, congratulations. You've officially turned me into a threat by association, Elias muttered, fumbling for the multi-tool on his belt as if it could ward off whatever alien menace was stomping its way toward them. He squinted into the darkness, catching the faint glint of something metallic moving between the ruins. When the first drone came into view, Elias's mouth went dry. It was a spindly, insect-like machine, its body a lattice of gleaming black metal that pulsed faintly with an eerie blue light. It moved with a disturbing precision, its 6 legs clicking against the ground as it scanned its surroundings with a glowing, cyclopean eye. Okay, cool. Giant alien spiders, Elias said, voice cracking slightly. Totally fine. This is fine. I'm fine. He wasn't fine. Lorana stirred beside him, struggling to sit up. Need deactivate, she said, gesturing weakly toward the device she still clutched in her hand. Elias stared at it, then at her, then at the advancing drone. Right. Deactivate. Sounds simple enough, except for the part where I don't know how alien jellyfish tech works. Her gaze sharpened, and for a moment, despite her weakened state, she exuded an air of authority that brooked no argument. Hold a device. Aim. At drone. Press. She paused, searching for the right word. Press. Luminous part. Press the glowing bit. Got it. Elias took the device gingerly, holding it as if it might explode. It was lighter than he expected, its surface warm and faintly pulsating. If this thing zaps me, I'm holding you personally responsible, he said, more to himself than to her. Creeping to the edge of the wall, he aimed the device at the nearest drone, which had stopped to scan a nearby pile of rubble. His finger hovered over the glowing patch on the device, and he hesitated. This had better not be a self-destruct button, he muttered, then pressed it. A high-pitched whine filled the air, and a beam of light shot from the device, striking the drone square in its glowing eye. The machine froze, shuddered, and then collapsed in a heap of sparking metal. Elias blinked. Well, that worked. Good to know I've got the alien equivalent of a bug zapper. But his moment of triumph was short-lived. 2 more drones skittered into view, their glowing eyes locking onto him with alarming speed. Lorana? Any chance this thing has a rapid-fire mode? Run, she rasped, her voice barely audible. Yeah, I was kind of hoping for a less cardio-intensive solution, Elias said, even as he hauled her to her feet. She leaned heavily on him, her strength clearly failing. Together they stumbled toward the edge of the village, the sound of clicking metal legs growing louder behind them. They reached a narrow alley between 2 crumbling buildings, and Elias ducked inside, pulling Lorana with him. The drones followed, their glowing eyes cutting through the darkness like searchlights. Okay, think, Elias, he muttered to himself, glancing around the alley. What would a sci-fi hero do? Probably something cool and resourceful, so naturally I'm going to do the opposite of that. Spotting a loose piece of metal piping lying nearby, he grabbed it and wedged it between 2 precariously balanced chunks of rubble above the alley entrance. Then, he aimed the alien device at the makeshift trap, firing a beam that caused the rubble to shift and collapse, blocking the drone's path. Ha! Elias crowed, a mix of relief and adrenaline making him giddy. Take that, you overgrown tin cans. Lorana managed a faint smile, though her expression was still strained. Clever, she said, her voice barely audible. Clever is my middle name. Well, actually it's Jacob, but let's not get bogged down in details, Elias said, his humor masking the rising panic he felt at her deteriorating condition. They continued deeper into the ruins, finally reaching a small overgrown courtyard where the hum of the drones was faint enough to suggest they'd lost the trail for now. Elias lowered Lorana onto a patch of moss-covered stone, panting from the exertion. Okay, he said, leaning against a nearby wall. We're safe, for the moment anyway. Now how about you start explaining what's going on? Who are you? What are those creepy robot spiders, and why are they after you? Lorana took a shaky breath, her glowing eyes dim but steady. I am Lorana, she said, her voice gaining a bit of strength. Scientist from Alaris, ship malfunctioned, stranded here. Alaris, Elias repeated, the name rolling awkwardly off his tongue. That's not on any map I've ever seen. Not Earth, she said simply, as if that explained everything. Right, of course, because why would this be simple? Elias ran a hand through his hair, staring at her in disbelief. So you're telling me you're an alien? Like an actual alien? She nodded weakly. Great. And here I thought today was just going to be about exploring a creepy abandoned village. Should have brought my intergalactic first aid kit, he said, trying to lighten the mood. Lorana tilted her head, her expression faintly puzzled. Joke? Yeah, joke. It's a thing humans do to cope with absurd situations. You should try it sometime. She gave a faint smile, the corners of her mouth lifting ever so slightly. Absurd, she echoed. You have no idea, Elias muttered. As the tension eased slightly, he glanced around the courtyard, taking in their surroundings. The faint glow of bioluminescent moss clung to the stones, casting an otherworldly light. Okay, Lorana, he said, turning back to her. If we're going to get through this, you need to tell me everything, starting with how to fix that ship of yours and get you off this rock before those metal nightmares find us again. Lorana's eyes met his, a flicker of hope sparking in their depths. We'll try, she said, her voice steadier now. Good, Elias said, offering her a lopsided grin. Because if anyone's going to save the day, it's going to be us. And by us, I mean mostly you. I'm just here for moral support and bad jokes. The faintest hint of a laugh escaped her, a sound that was equal parts strange and comforting. Despite the gravity of the situation, Elias felt a flicker of determination. Whatever mess he'd stumbled into, he wasn't backing out now. Elias woke to the distinct sensation of someone or something watching him. Blinking groggily, he sat up, his back protesting the hours spent slumped against the courtyard wall. The dim light of the bioluminescent moss still painted the scene in an eerie glow, but it wasn't the glow that held his attention. It was Lorana. She was crouched a few feet away, staring at him with those luminous eyes of hers, head tilted slightly like a curious bird. "Morning," Elias mumbled, scrubbing a hand over his face. "Or, evening. Space o'clock? I don't suppose your alien tech comes with a watch function." "Rested well?" Lorana asked, her voice smoother now, though still layered with that strange harmonic quality. "As well as anyone can after being chased by killer robot spiders, which, for the record, is not something I ever want to experience again," Elias replied, stretching. "What about you, feeling better?" She nodded, though her movements were still deliberate, cautious. "Energy, returning, healing slow, but steady." "Good, because I have a feeling we're going to need you at full strength if we want to survive whatever this is," Elias said. He paused, considering his next words carefully. "Speaking of which, care to explain what this is? You know, the whole killer drones, stranded alien, desperate plea for help situation? A little context might be nice." Lorana hesitated, her gaze flicking to the sky, where the faintest hint of dawn was beginning to creep over the horizon. "My ship," she began, "carried valuable technology, prototypes, research, crashed, damaged." "Okay," Elias said slowly. "And I'm guessing those drones weren't sent by the Intergalactic Welcome Committee?" "They... scavengers," Lorana said, her expression darkening. "Machines sent to harvest technology. Destroy... threats." "Neat. So we're not just running for our lives, we're also sitting on top of something they really, really want." "Love that for us," Elias said with a weak laugh. "Where's your ship now?" "Hidden," she said, a faint note of pride in her voice. "Camouflaged, but power, low. If found..." Elias held up a hand. "Say no more. Found equals bad. Got it. So the plan is to fix your ship, juice it back up, and get you out of here before the robot apocalypse catches up to us, right?" Lorana tilted her head. "In essence, correct." "Great. Sounds simple enough," Elias said, standing and brushing off his pants. "Except for the part where I have no idea how to fix an alien spaceship. Do you have a manual or something? Maybe a Spaceships for Dummies guide lying around?" Lorana's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. "Not required. I guide you." "Well, aren't I lucky?" Elias muttered. "Okay, lead the way, Captain Alien. Just, try not to pass out again. My back is still mad at me for carrying you last time." Lorana rose, her movements more fluid now, though she still leaned slightly against the crumbling fountain for support. She gestured toward the northern edge of the village, where the terrain sloped upward into a series of jagged hills. "Ship. There," she said. Elias squinted at the hills, which looked about as inviting as a nest of angry vipers. "Of course it is. Couldn't have crash-landed in a nice flat meadow, could you? Maybe near a coffee shop?" She didn't respond, already starting to move, her steps deliberate but determined. Elias sighed and followed, muttering to himself. "Sure, Elias, go explore the creepy abandoned village, you said. Nothing bad ever happens in those, you said." The trek through the hills was slow, the terrain uneven and littered with jagged rocks that seemed to delight in tripping him up. "So," Elias said after the third time he nearly face-planted, "is this like standard alien crash site protocol? Find the most inconvenient spot possible and aim for it." "Stealth," Lorana said simply. "Right, stealth, because nothing screams stealthy like a giant spaceship smacking into a mountain." Lorana's gaze flicked back to him, her expression unreadable. Humor, coping mechanism. "You're catching on," Elias said with a grin. As they climbed higher, the faint hum of machinery reached Elias's ears, growing louder with each step. He glanced at Lorana, who seemed unfazed, or as unfazed as someone recovering from what was probably a near-death experience could be. Finally, they crested a ridge, and Elias froze. Below them, nestled in a narrow ravine, was Lorana's ship, or what was left of it. The vessel was sleek and otherworldly, its surface a patchwork of shimmering metal that seemed to ripple like water in the sunlight. But it was also heavily damaged, one side crumpled inward, as if it had been struck by a meteor. "Wow," Elias said, staring. "That's, a lot of ship." Lorana's expression softened, her gaze lingering on the wreckage. "Home. Far from home," she said quietly. Elias glanced at her, his usual sarcasm faltering. "We'll get it working," he said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "We'll fix it and you'll get back to Alaris, was it?" She nodded, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Much to do." They made their way down into the ravine, the air growing cooler as the walls of rock rose around them. Up close, the ship was even more impressive and more daunting. Panels of alien text flickered faintly along its surface, and strange, organic-looking tendrils extended from its underside, half buried in the rocky ground. "Okay," Elias said, hands on his hips. "Where do we even start?" Lorana stepped forward, her movements more assured now. She placed her hand against the ship's hull, and a section of it slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a narrow entryway. "Inside," she said simply. Elias hesitated. "Right, inside the alien spaceship. Totally normal, not at all terrifying." He followed her through the opening, ducking to avoid hitting his head on the low ceiling. The interior of the ship was dimly lit, its walls pulsating faintly with an otherworldly glow. The air was cool and carried a faint metallic tang, like the smell of a summer storm. "Okay," Elias said, trying to ignore the fact that the walls seemed to be breathing. "Now what?" Lorana gestured to a console at the center of the room, its surface covered in alien symbols that shifted and rearranged themselves like living organisms. "Power restore," she said, her voice steady now. "Then repairs." Elias stared at the console, then at her. "Right. Easy. Just restore power to the highly advanced alien spaceship with my extensive knowledge of... not this." Lorana gave him a faintly amused look. Guide. "Yeah, you're gonna have to. Because unless this thing has a big red button labeled on, I'm out of ideas," Elias said. Lorana stepped beside him, her fingers dancing over the console with practiced precision. As the ship's systems flickered to life, Elias couldn't help but marvel at the sheer absurdity of his situation. "Just so we're clear," he said, watching as the alien text on the console resolved into something resembling a star map. "This is officially the weirdest road trip I've ever been on, and I once got lost in Nebraska with a clown car full of alpacas." Lorana tilted her head, clearly confused. "Alpacas? Never mind," Elias said with a grin. "Let's just focus on not dying, yeah?" For the first time, Lorana's expression softened into something resembling a genuine smile. "Not dying. Good plan." The soft hum of the spaceship's systems filled the air, a comforting rhythm that belied the catastrophic state of the ship itself. Elias leaned against the curved wall of the control room, watching Lorana work at the console. Her glowing fingers moved with a grace that could only come from years of familiarity, manipulating holographic displays that sprang to life in response to her touch. "So," Elias said, breaking the silence, "is this one of those situations where you flip a switch, the ship magically fixes itself, and we ride off into the sunset? Or do we have to bust out the alien equivalent of duct tape and prayers?" Lorana glanced at him, her expression a mix of amusement and exasperation. "Closer. Second option," she said, gesturing to a hologram of the ship. The display showed a detailed schematic, highlighting several areas in angry red. Elias squinted at the projection. "That's a lot of red. Red's bad, right? Please tell me your species uses red to mean everything's fine, relax." "Critical failures," Lorana said, her tone matter-of-fact. Of course it is, Elias muttered. He pushed off the wall and approached the console, pointing to one of the highlighted sections. So what's the plan? Do we start with the broken, whatever that is? Power core, Lorana said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Core, damaged. Without it, no flight, no defense. Great, Elias said, clapping his hands together. Fix the power core, easy peasy. I assume that's the part of the ship conveniently located behind a terrifying maze of alien tech? Lorana's faint smile told him he wasn't far off. Fantastic, he said, throwing up his hands. All right, lead the way. Let's go poke at the alien reactor and hope it doesn't melt my face off. Lorana motioned for him to follow as she moved toward a narrow corridor that led deeper into the ship. The walls seemed to pulse faintly as they walked, the light shifting in response to their movements. So, Elias said, trying to keep the mood light, is your ship alive? Because it's kind of giving me space whale vibes. Not alive, Lorana said, her tone patient. Bioorganic, hybrid, adaptable. Right, Elias said, nodding as if that made perfect sense. Totally normal. Every spaceship should be part plant, part metal, part whatever this is. They reached a large circular chamber dominated by a cylindrical device at its center. The power core, if Elias had to guess, looked like a cross between a glowing beehive and an angry storm cloud. Its surface was cracked, faint arcs of energy sparking across its surface. That, Elias said, pointing, looks like it wants to kill me. Lorana ignored his comment, already moving to a control panel embedded in the wall. Core, unstable, must stabilize before repairs. Okay, but what happens if we don't stabilize it? Explosion, Lorana said without looking up. Elias stared at her. Explosion, as in big boom, right? Not like a cute little spark? Lorana's lack of response told him everything he needed to know. Cool, 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 Elias said, pacing nervously. So the plan is to stop the giant alien reactor from exploding. No pressure, literally, because if there's too much pressure, we're toast. Lorana glanced at him, her lips twitching in the faintest hint of a smile. Focus, she said simply. Yes, ma'am, Elias said, mock saluting. Tell me what to do and I'll do my best not to accidentally blow us up. Lorana handed him a small glowing device that resembled a futuristic screwdriver. Stabilizers, misaligned, must recalibrate manually. Manually? Of course, Elias said, staring at the device like it might bite him. And by manually, you mean… Enter chamber, adjust stabilizers, she said, gesturing to a small hatch at the base of the power core. Elias followed her gesture and immediately shook his head. Oh no, 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 I'm not crawling into that death trap. Have you seen how unstable that thing looks? Lorana fixed him with a steady gaze. Trust, essential. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Fine, but if I die in there, you'd better name your next ship after me. Crouching, Elias opened the hatch and peered inside. The interior of the core was a maze of glowing conduits and humming machinery, the air thick with the scent of ozone. Crawling inside, he gripped the glowing tool tightly, muttering to himself. This is fine, totally fine. Just fixing an alien reactor, no big deal. Lorana's voice crackled through a speaker embedded in the wall. First stabilizers to left, twist, counterclockwise. Elias spotted the stabilizer, a glowing rod embedded in the wall, and reached for it. As he twisted it, the reactor let out a low, ominous hum. Lorana, it's making angry noises. Is that supposed to happen? Normal, she replied calmly. Normal for you or normal for humans? Because I feel like we have very different definitions of normal, Elias muttered, moving to the next stabilizer. The process was slow and nerve-wracking, each adjustment accompanied by unsettling noises from the reactor. But with Lorana's guidance, Elias managed to recalibrate the final stabilizer without triggering an explosion. Crawling back out of the chamber, he flopped onto the floor with a dramatic groan. I'd like to formally request a less dangerous task next time. Done well, Lorana said, her tone warm with approval. Yeah, well, don't get used to it, Elias said, sitting up. So, what's next? More tinkering? Or do we get to take a break and eat some alien snacks or something? Lorana tilted her head. Snacks? Never mind, Elias said with a laugh. Let's just keep this ship from blowing up and then we'll talk about snacks. As they worked together to repair the core, Elias found himself marveling at the strange partnership they'd formed. For all her otherworldly qualities, Lorana was surprisingly relatable. And despite the looming threat of death and destruction, he couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could pull this off. The steady hum of the repaired power core was a small victory, a reassuring presence amid the chaos. Elias leaned back against the console, wiping sweat from his brow. Okay, I officially nominate myself for Intergalactic Engineer of the Year. Do I get a trophy or better yet, a pizza? Lorana arched one brow, her expression hovering between confusion and amusement. Pizza. You know, Elias said, miming a circular shape with his hands. Flat, cheesy, occasionally topped with questionable choices like pineapple. Her brow furrowed further, clearly puzzled. Cheese? He sighed. Remind me to introduce your species to the joys of Earth food once we're not in imminent danger. Trust me, it'll change your life. She gave a faint smile before turning her attention back to the holographic display. The ship's systems flickered to life one by one, the once red alerts fading to a cautious yellow. Core stabilized. Systems functional, but limited. So we're limping along, Elias said, nodding. Better than nothing. What's next? Lorana hesitated, her fingers hovering over the console. Next, critical, communication array. Communication array? You mean like a space radio? Not simple, she said, her tone heavy. Array, damaged in crash, repair, complex. Elias groaned, slumping dramatically against the wall. Of course it is. Nothing's ever easy with you aliens, is it? She tilted her head, a flicker of amusement in her glowing eyes. Humor. Coping mechanism? You're catching on, he said with a grin. Lorana projected a new schematic of the ship, highlighting a section near the top. Array, external, exposed. Let me guess, Elias said, pointing at the hologram. That's the part that's conveniently located on the roof, where the killer robots can see us? She nodded. Risk high. Great. Love that for us, Elias said, clapping his hands together. So how do we fix it without turning into bug food? Lorana gestured to a small compartment embedded in the wall. Inside was a sleek, cylindrical device that looked suspiciously like a grenade. Elias froze. Is that what I think it is? Disruptor, she said simply. Temporary. Disable drones. Oh, good, he said with a nervous laugh. Because nothing screams safe and easy, like tossing an alien EMP at a bunch of killer robots. Totally fine. Lorana's lips twitched. Alternative? Elias sighed, taking the disruptor with exaggerated reluctance. Fine. But if this thing blows up in my hand, I'm haunting you. The plan was straightforward, or as straightforward as anything involving alien tech and killer drones could be. Elias would climb to the top of the ship, use the disruptor to create a brief window of safety, and repair the communication array under Lorana's guidance. What could possibly go wrong? Elias muttered to himself as he climbed the exterior of the ship, the metallic surface cold beneath his fingers. The top of the ship offered a breathtaking view of the ravine, the jagged cliffs casting long shadows in the fading light. But the beauty of the scene was marred by the ominous presence of drones hovering in the distance, their sleek forms glinting like predatory birds. Elias took a deep breath, gripping the disruptor tightly. Okay, space grenade, don't fail me now. Lorana's voice crackled through his earpiece. Disruptor, activate now. Roger that, Captain Alien, Elias said, pressing the device's activation button. A pulse of energy rippled outward, washing over the ravine like a silent shockwave. The drones faltered mid-flight, their movements jerky and disoriented. "All right," Elias said, scrambling to the array. "Let's fix this thing before they reboot and decide I look like a snack." The array was a mess of twisted metal and shattered components, but Lorana's voice guided him with calm precision. "Replace module. Adjust frequency." "Replace the what now?" Elias muttered, fumbling with the alien tools she'd provided. "Left panel. Twist clockwise." Elias followed her instructions, the tension in his shoulders easing as the array began to respond. "Okay, not gonna lie. This feels like I'm defusing a bomb in a bad action movie." "Focus," Lorana said, though there was a hint of amusement in her voice. With the final adjustment, the array powered up, emitting a low hum that vibrated through the ship. "Done," Elias said, raising his hands triumphantly. The celebration was short-lived. A piercing sound filled the air, a mechanical screech that sent shivers down his spine. The drones, now fully functional, turned toward him in eerie unison. Lorana?" Elias said, backing toward the hatch. "We've got company. Return, quickly," her voice urged. Elias didn't need to be told twice. He slid down the side of the ship, narrowly avoiding a volley of energy blasts as the drones closed in. Diving through the hatch, he landed in an ungraceful heap on the floor. "Next time," he panted, "you're climbing up there." Lorana helped him to his feet, her expression calm, but her glowing eyes sharp with urgency. "Signal. Sent. Help. May come." "May?" Elias said, his voice rising. "As in might?" "Oh, that's comforting." She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly steady. "Hope? Better than none." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You aliens and your cryptic optimism." "All right, what now?" "Prepare," she said simply. "Drones. Not give up." "Of course not," Elias muttered, picking up one of the alien tools. "Well, if we're going to go down, let's at least make it interesting. Think they'll appreciate a good knock-knock joke?" Lorana's faint smile was the only answer he needed. Together, they turned to face the challenge ahead, the hum of the ship's systems a steady reminder of the fragile alliance they'd forged. The ship's interior buzzed with a chaotic mix of warning lights and low, ominous hums. Elias paced back and forth in the control room, his mind racing. "Okay, so here's the thing," he said, gesturing wildly. "I've seen enough sci-fi movies to know that the drones are probably coordinating some kind of super attack right now, like forming Voltron or something. Is that a thing with these guys? Please tell me it's not." Lorana glanced up from the console, her expression a blend of patience and amusement. "Voltron? You know, giant robot made of smaller robots?" "No?" Elias waved a hand dismissively. "Never mind. The point is, we're sitting ducks if we don't figure out our next move." "Calm, essential," Lorana said, her glowing eyes steady. "Easy for you to say," Elias shot back. "You're not the one who almost got vaporized 10 minutes ago." Lorana tilted her head, clearly unimpressed by his theatrics. "Focus. Survival." "Right," Elias said, forcing himself to take a deep breath. "Focus. Survival." "Got it. So, what's the plan, Captain Glowy?" Lorana's fingers danced over the console, bringing up a schematic of the surrounding area. "Drones. Controlled from Nexus. Disrupt. Nexus. Drones fail." "Ah, yes," Elias said, squinting at the display. "The classic destroy the mothership strategy." "Love it. Except, how do we find this Nexus without getting fried?" Lorana gestured to a faint signal on the map, pulsing like a heartbeat. "Location detected ravine edge." Elias leaned closer, frowning at the screen. "That's not far, but it's wide open, no cover. We'll be sitting ducks." Lorana nodded. "Risk unavoidable." Cool, Elias said, nodding like a man accepting his doom. "So we go out there, hope the drones don't turn us into Swiss cheese and blow up their big shiny hub?" "No big deal." She arched a brow. "Humor? Again?" "Humor is all I've got, lady," Elias said with a grin. The two of them stood at the edge of the ravine, the alien landscape bathed in an eerie glow from the planet's twin moons. In the distance, the Nexus pulsed with an otherworldly light, surrounded by a swarm of drones. "All right," Elias said, crouching behind a jagged rock. "What's the game plan? Distract them with interpretive dance while you hack into their system?" Lorana ignored his quip, holding up a small device that resembled a glowing crystal. "Device, disrupt Nexus defenses. Must reach control node." "And I'm guessing the control node is smack dab in the middle of that death swarm," Elias said, sighing. "Figures." Lorana nodded. "You distract. I deploy device." "Oh, great," Elias muttered. "I get the fun job." Moments later, Elias found himself sprinting across the ravine floor, waving his arms like a lunatic. "Hey, metalheads," he shouted. "Over here! Come get me, you flying toasters!" The drones reacted immediately, peeling away from the Nexus to pursue him. Energy blasts sizzled through the air, narrowly missing him as he zigzagged wildly. "This is fine," he panted, dodging behind a boulder. "Totally fine. Just outrunning killer robots. No big deal." Meanwhile, Lorana moved with a fluid grace, slipping through the shadows toward the Nexus. The glowing crystal in her hand pulsed in sync with the structure's light, guiding her to the control node. Elias peeked out from behind his cover, hurling another taunt. "Is that all you've got? I've seen more threatening blenders." The drones didn't seem to appreciate the joke, focusing their fire on his position. "Anytime now, Lorana," he yelled, ducking as a blast scorched the rock above his head. At the Nexus, Lorana reached the control node, a crystalline structure embedded in the ground. She placed the disruptor against its surface, her glowing fingers moving in a precise sequence to activate the device. The Nexus let out a low, resonant hum, its light flickering erratically. The drones froze mid-air, their movements halting as if caught in an invisible web. Elias peeked out cautiously. Is that supposed to happen?" "Device working," Lorana said, her voice calm but focused. "Great," Elias said, stepping out from behind the boulder. "Now let's get out of here before—" Before he could finish, the Nexus emitted a high-pitched whine, its light intensifying. The drones began to move again, this time erratically, as if caught between conflicting commands. "Lorana?" Elias said, his voice rising. "What's happening?" "System unstable," she said, backing away from the node. "Nexus overload." "Overload," Elias repeated, his eyes widening. "As in kaboom?" "Run," she said simply. The two of them sprinted away from the Nexus, the ground shaking beneath their feet as the structure's light grew blinding. Behind them, the drones dropped from the sky one by one, their connections severed. They barely made it behind a ridge when the Nexus exploded, a shockwave rippling through the ravine. Elias lay flat on the ground, catching his breath. "Well," he said, panting, "that was exhilarating. And by exhilarating, I mean absolutely terrifying." Lorana sat beside him, her expression serene despite the chaos. "Nexus destroyed. Drones no longer threat." "Good," Elias said, rolling onto his back. "Because I am officially done being a decoy. Next time you're the one running around like an idiot." She tilted her head, her glowing eyes soft with amusement. "You... brave." "Yeah, well, don't get used to it," he said with a grin. As the dust settled, the two of them shared a rare moment of quiet, the stars above shining brightly against the alien sky. Despite the danger, Elias couldn't help but feel a strange sense of accomplishment. "All right," he said, sitting up. "What's next, Captain Glowy? Please tell me it involves snacks this time." Lorana's faint smile was all the answer he needed. Together, they prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead, their unlikely partnership growing stronger with each passing moment. The air around the ravine hung heavy, with the faint aftershocks of the Nexus explosion. The ground still sizzled in places, giving off tiny wisps of steam, while the drones lay scattered like a defeated army of metallic carcasses. Elias stood at the ridge's edge, staring at the destruction they had wrought, hands planted on his hips. "Well," he said, breaking the silence, "on the bright side, I think we've just made this place a little less tourist-friendly." Lorana stepped beside him, her tall, ethereal figure unbothered by the winds stirring up dust around them. "Drones. No longer threat," she said, her tone neutral, but the faintest hint of relief in her glowing eyes. "Mission accomplished," Elias replied, nodding. "Now all we need is a souvenir stand and a coffee cart, and this place will be perfect." Lorana's brow furrowed in mild confusion. "Souvenir? Never mind," Elias said with a small laugh. "I'll explain Earth capitalism some other time." Back inside the ship, Elias flopped onto one of the cushioned benches in the main cabin, rubbing his aching shoulders. "Okay, so we survived. The evil robots are toast. And your fancy glowing rock thing did its job. Now what?" Lorana was at the console, her fingers moving fluidly over the controls. "Signal. Clear. Message. Sent. Rescue. Coming." "Rescue?" Elias perked up, leaning forward. "You mean your people are coming? Like an entire alien search and rescue team?" She nodded, her gaze softening slightly. "Soon. Time. Unknown." Elias frowned. "So you're saying we could be stuck here for hours? Or days? Or, knowing my luck, forever?" "Patience," Lorana said calmly. "Right," Elias muttered, leaning back against the wall. "Patience. My best quality. Definitely didn't almost hyperventilate when we were running from drones or anything." Her faint smile returned as she sat across from him. For a moment, the quiet between them was almost companionable. The hum of the ship filled the space like a gentle reminder of everything they'd been through. As they waited, Elias found himself wandering the ship. He poked his head into rooms filled with strange alien machinery, touched walls that pulsed faintly with energy, and marveled at the design of the vessel. He paused in what looked like a storage room, where a collection of shimmering objects caught his eye. "Hey, Lorana," he called out. "What's all this stuff?" She appeared in the doorway, her movements fluid and soundless. "Artifacts," she said simply. "Artifacts?" Elias turned to her, raising an eyebrow. "Like ancient alien relics? Or just the alien equivalent of junk drawers?" Lorana's expression was unreadable. "Important to history. My people preserve what is lost." Elias picked up a small, crystalline orb that seemed to pulse faintly in his hand. "So you're kind of like space archaeologists, huh? Digging up the past, saving cool stuff?" She nodded, watching him closely. He turned the orb over in his hands, the faint light within it casting strange shadows on his face. "You know, back home, people don't really think about preserving things. We just toss stuff away when we're done with it. It's kind of nice what you're doing, holding on to the past." "Past, foundation of future," Lorana said softly. Elias nodded, setting the orb back down. "I think I'm starting to get that." Later, as the two of them sat in the main cabin, Elias couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened since he'd stumbled into the abandoned village. "You know," he said, breaking the silence, "when I first came here, I wasn't exactly looking for whatever this is." Lorana tilted her head. "Regret?" "Not regret," Elias said, shaking his head. "Just surprise. A month ago, my biggest worry was whether my car would pass inspection. Now I'm out here blowing up alien tech and saving the universe or whatever." She gave him a long, thoughtful look. "Change. Inevitable. Growth. Choice." Elias chuckled. "You've got a way with words, you know that." Her faint smile returned. Hours later, a low rhythmic hum filled the cabin, accompanied by a series of blinking lights on the console. Lorana's posture straightened, her eyes glowing brighter. "Rescue." Here. Elias felt a strange mix of relief and something he couldn't quite place. Nostalgia, maybe. He followed Lorana to the viewport, where a massive ship descended through the atmosphere, its sleek metallic form shimmering against the backdrop of stars. "Well," he said, staring up at the craft, "that's definitely not a pizza delivery guy." Lorana glanced at him, her gaze soft. "You... safe now?" Elias nodded, though the realization that their strange partnership was ending hit harder than he expected. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Thanks to you." As the alien rescue team escorted Lorana onto their ship, Elias hesitated at the ramp, unsure of what to say. She turned back to him, her glowing eyes meeting his. "Elias. Brave. Kind. You... changed path." He managed to grin, though his throat felt tight. "Yeah, well, you're not so bad yourself. For an alien." Her lips curved into a faint smile before she stepped onto the ship, the doors closing behind her with a quiet hiss. Elias stood in the clearing, watching as the rescue craft ascended into the sky, leaving him alone beneath the stars. For the first time in his life, he felt small in the best possible way, like a single thread in an infinite tapestry. The universe was vast, and he'd been a part of something extraordinary. He glanced back at the ravine, the faint glow of the destroyed nexus still visible in the distance. With a deep breath, he turned and began the long walk back to his own ship, a strange sense of peace settling over him. Elias had come to the abandoned village searching for answers to questions he couldn't articulate. He was leaving with something far more valuable, a reminder that even the smallest connections could shape the course of a life, or a galaxy. And maybe, just maybe, he'd bring a slice of pineapple pizza on his next adventure.